You guys play video games, right?
No.
Yes.
I don't think Jake plays video games. Like, you play a video game once a month, and that's Civilization.
Dude, yeah, actually, yeah.
You're like, how did I get here? There's a delightful subgenre of video game called stealth games. Like Dishonored, Thief, or Splinter Cell. So my
like
question
Last
is
of
this.
Us, Last of Us.
Actually, you can kind of stealth around in Last of Us.
yeah.
Like Minecraft, right?
Oh, no. All right, so when you play video games with stealth, do you sneak around, and do you hide, and do you stealth?
Oh. No. No, I don't.
Wait, what?
Wait, what? Okay,
No.
tell me what game it is and what you did.
So I'm thinking of Naughty Dog. I'm thinking of like Uncharted and The Last of Us. And whenever there's an opportunity to stealth, normally they'll show like one guard with his back towards you. Most of the time I'll just kill that one guard and then I'll just continue forward at a leisurely pace. And if someone sees me, the fight begins. And I don't put that much... I don't put much into stealth at all in those games. It just slows down the game to a point where it's like, I just want to have fun and have a good time. I don't want to really take my time to be sneaky.
Wow.
So I think the last stealth game that I played was Deus Ex. It's not Human Revolution. It's the one that came after it. Because as you know, I don't really play a lot of video games either. In that game, you can play it however you want. It could be like a melee guy or a gun blazing guy or a stealth guy. So I try to be stealthy, but chances are I'll just get caught and then wind up shooting stuff. Mm-hmm. So it's like stealth is supposed to be plan A, but it's really like plan B or C, because I'm just going to wind up shooting everything anyway.
Wow, I stealth all the time.
Wait, really?
I'm practically in stealth in real life as well.
Who said that?
Yeah, no, I love playing stealth. I think I did a full stealth playthrough of Fallout where I would just always sneak attack everything. Just sneak attack the world.
Just put that on a t-shirt.
I don't know if that... Oh, man. But yeah, I just love the idea of killing someone before they even have the chance to react in games.
Oh, in games. Welcome to Vox Arcana. I'm William.
I'm Jake.
I'm David.
And this is a Dungeons & Dragons podcast, episode 16, The Rogue. Before we begin this episode, I want to take us back through the annals of time to 1979, which is probably the year that the Rogue was invented in D&D. I don't know exactly the year. I could look it up, but I'm not going to. So, originally, the base game of Dungeons & Dragons, when Gygax and Dave Arneson created it, it had three classes. It had the Fighter, the Cleric, and the Magic User. The Rogue was actually originally, I think it was called the Thief. Mm-hmm. It was a specialist class, and it was made up by some guys in a game store. I think it was called Arrow Hobbies, and I think it was in Santa Monica, but I could be wrong. But the point is, they suggested this class that they had been using in their game, and they told Gygax about it. And then, lo and behold, he just put it in the next version of the game.
Oh, that's so cool.
And then everybody played as this thief. And if I accidentally say rogue instead of thief, just bear with me. And so it's been in the game almost, not at the very beginning, but very near the beginning, because people were just hacking this game and making their own house rules. And the rogue was, as it was designed in the original game, just a dungeon busting machine. He had, really, you could climb walls and detect traps and detect doors and all of these very specific tasks needed for that kind of game they were playing back then, which was just a big dungeon crawl. Mm-hmm. The rogue we have today is no longer the thief. It's a much bigger, I think, a lot better, more interesting class.
Whew.
Wow.
Any questions, class?
I feel very schooled.
No, I think that's interesting that it was like kind of the first almost DLC of like the original Dungeons and Dragons.
That's pretty true.
It's interesting that the class was born out of this need for a better character for dungeons, because the game was all about dungeons and going through and wandering through them. And this class is essentially, from the beginning, it was designed specifically to just defeat dungeons.
Yeah. Yeah.
Compared to all the other classes where they're designed with the world in mind as their own just unique feature, this one was specifically designed with dungeons and the gameplay of dungeons in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
But it has evolved and changed.
So this clicks so well for me because I always consider the rogue kind of a staple of D&D, but I guess from the beginning I'm realizing its effect as a dungeon specialist, because in one of my last campaigns, my players were going into the first dungeon. It's kind of an introductory dungeon. It's under the catacombs of the capital city. And so they're going under, and I'm like, oh no. None of them have lockpicking. There's no rogue in the party. None of them have like any specializations. Like essentially, they won't be able to get past any doors that are locked. And so I'm like, oh no. So I literally introduced a character, Vance Harper, who later became the leader of the entire Harper organization. But he was just like a halfling rogue that was their skill monkey that would just be able to open doors and open chests and comedically get his hand bitten by a mimic. Like his whole job was to make sure the dungeon delve went smoothly. And so that really makes sense of like what the rogue, how it originally started as the thief that was just kind of a specialist at getting through dungeons and unlocking traps and getting into hard to reach places. Like, it just makes so much sense now that I realized how I literally had to shoehorn a rogue in order for a dungeon delve to go smoothly.
Yeah, and I think you really do need them. So speaking of picking locks and opening doors, what are some defining features of rogue in 5th edition?
In 5th edition specifically?
Yes.
I'm thinking of someone who has really good stealth.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a main thing that they're good at. They're good at single target damage, so they'll be able to just burst down a single character with their sneak attacks. They have a lot of interesting ways that they can spec, so they can be very deceptive. They can be very investigative. They have a lot of different interesting paths that they can go down.
I just had a funny idea for a rogue real fast because I'm going to forget this. Imagine a party that has a rogue, but the party doesn't know they have a rogue because he just follows them. He's like tailing them and he puts them, or he takes them out of jams when it happens, but he just is it always looks like a different person, like in a disguise.
Oh my.
And so they have literally no idea he's even in the party.
Huh. I think that goes into maybe a potential problem with the rogue. In that I think the rogue coupled with the ranger is one of the two classes in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons where they almost work best alone. And they need a really good hook to be involved in an adventuring party. Because like I said, like they're skill
you're saying
monkey.
Thematically, they're just loners.
Yeah. And they're normally like trying to avoid detection. They're normally trying to stay away from, potential people who are lawmakers or lawmen. They want to, I don't know, like stay under the radar and work alone. And sometimes if you're in a famous adventuring party, it doesn't really make sense for a rogue to be a part of that. Like it takes a really good hook for a rogue to not work by himself, but to work with a team.
So maybe he is hired. He's just in the fiction a professional, and he's hired a fee every month, or he's paid a fee every month and just travels with him. He's got no personal stake in the mission outside of his paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
I think that with the rogue class in general, there are a lot of tools that you can use to hook a rogue into your game. So oftentimes rogues, they're not particularly... I can say they can be greedy, but they're not... They always have people that they work with.
Yeah.
So they always have an organization, or they're always for hire. There are always ties for them in the world. If you're an assassin, you're not just like randomly a serial killer. Like you're gonna be hired by bigger people to assassinate other targets.
That's true.
So there are a lot of... You have a lot of skills as a rogue, and people are gonna want to have those skills being used.
I think it's a good point. Your rogue shouldn't be a serial killer, because obviously there's a kind of a psychopath underpinning there that might be uncomfortable. But the idea of them selling this really nasty service, selling murder for hire, it really speaks to the depth of the connections that this type of character has to the underworld. And I don't mean the Underdark. I mean like crime and organized... I almost said organized religion. Organized crime and anybody with power and money, frankly.
Yeah, I think the rogue requires, when you're making it as a player, like when you're creating your rogue character, you really have to talk with your dungeon master and make sure you know the world well enough that you can kind of insert your rogue into it. Because the rogue requires some sort of organizational hierarchy maybe that you're a part of, or if nothing else, it requires a knowledge of how the law works in a society to know, you know, how much of a criminal or scoundrel or how you're viewed by the law. You need to know the world a little bit.
If I was going to have a player create a rogue, I would make them create 2 factions, and that would be the faction that they serve and the rival faction to them. And that way they don't have to like ask, oh, what factions are here? They just have sort of a small hand in world building. The other thought that I have is rogues, to me, are a very urban class, more than maybe any other class so far. And that is, even though they were originally designed for dungeon delves, I think that they operate in more of a social domain in the city. They are the ones maybe at parties infiltrating. Like these are like CIA operatives. These are like spies. They're powerful and dangerous, and they, frankly, the more I think about it, the weirder it is to think of this kind of person out in the woods camping and eating an owlbear. You know?
There's a lot of different ways you can go with the rogue, which is why I think when Gygax and them were making advanced Dungeons and Dragons, they got this advice. They're like, oh, that class fits, because it has to be an archetype, but it has to be broad enough that like a bunch of stuff can fit in it. So a guy that's just really good at picking locks is a rogue, while also James Bond could be considered a rogue, while also like a supreme evil assassin could be considered a rogue. And all of those are very different things, but they all fall under this roguish archetype umbrella that really makes it... I really like this class. I mean, what do you guys think? Do you guys like the rogue or dislike it, like on average?
So I didn't have any strong feelings for the rogue before this episode, but doing my research for it made me realize there's just such a history and depth and so many cool hooks into the world. When we were doing our background discussion, we bashed on the hermit. It made me realize that even without a background, just the rogue flavored alone in this game is dripping with flavor.
Yeah, I actually think that the rogue is probably my favorite class in terms of design, in terms of like how it fits into the 5e system and how it works in general. I think it's probably the best design class.
You're saying mechanically or thematically?
All around.
Yeah, I agree.
I love the well-rounded nature of it. I think that other classes are still really good, but in some areas they lack. But the rogue is just supremely well-rounded.
I think it's really good at what it does.
Yeah, I think it fits into the version of D&D. Like it fits into 5th edition so perfectly, like just like a glove. And it's weird. The rogue, I kind of agree with you, David. It's in my top 3 favorite classes. I really enjoy the rogue. And it's really interesting. The rogue fits really well into my type of games, which are more social, a lot of times more urban games. But when I look at my players and all the classes they've played, I've ran D&D for the past, 5 or 6 years. And I've ran, probably 7 or 8 different campaigns that were each like 12 to 15 sessions long. But in all of those combined players, I've only had one rogue. And it's just blown my mind.
Oh my gosh.
And then I compare that to the amount of times that I've got to play D&D, which, excluding one-shots, like 2 or 3 sessions, those type of games, of the 3 times I've done that, 2 out of the 3 of them I've played a rogue. So I'm realizing how much I love the rogue. And like it's definitely one of my favorite classes. And I agree, David. I think it's like, I think it fits into the 5e system just perfectly.
Yeah. Right, so let's talk about what thieves are good for. I will come out and say it. They are the sneak attack machine that just does damage consistently. Big hits.
Yeah, I think sneak attack is super cool because it gives kind of the whole initiative system more of a meaning. Like when you're a rogue, like you need to be high in the initiative order. You need to be able to sneak up. You need to get surprise attacks. And so, yeah, it's just, there's nothing more satisfying than sneaking up on someone and just getting double damage or getting a crit or just like, it's so satisfying.
It really is.
Yeah, I love how the rogue can be so independent, and yet it can also work really well with the teams based on the system.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go behind lines and you can try to get advantage that way, or you can work with your team and have the tank, go up and start fighting this guy, and then you can go ahead and get your sneak attack that way.
Mm-hmm.
So you have options, and working with people isn't totally discouraged for being a rogue. You can still have ways of playing off of your teammates.
Mm-hmm.
Or
I think another thing that rogues are good for is essentially they're skill monkeys. They get a lot of expertise and like a lot of different skills that they can be good at. And it really helps in a ton of situations. Like oftentimes you'd be like, oh crap, we're locked in this room, we need to get out. And the rogue will be the first one there with a lockpick. You'll find yourself in these kind of obscure situations, and the rogue kind of always has something it can do, whether that's acrobatics or lockpicking or sleight of hands or whatever, to be able to figure a way out, which I think it could just add layer upon layer of complexity and fun.
But at the same time, they're not good at everything. They have a very niche set of skills that makes them very defined as characters. Like this guy can sneak, this guy can do sleight of hand, and this guy can he does a lot of like really good burst damage on a single target, and he's not overshadowing other members of the party in that he can do everything, and he takes over the party. He has his like niche. The rogue has their niche point at which they shine, but they also leave room for other members to
They
shine.
shine in ways that other classes specifically don't, which is really cool.
I think the rogue, why I find them so fascinating and cool is because they can have ways out of situations, specifically social situations. Like a lot of times when I'm making a social encounter, if there's a rogue in the party, I'll have to make that encounter different, because they will have a lot more tips and tricks in order to navigate an urban environment or social situations. And I think while, the wizard or the fighter or whatever might have like a ton of options in combat, I think the rogue, perhaps of all the classes, has the most non-combat options available to them.
Yeah, it's true. Because nobody can climb like a rogue, as far as I know, unless you
sleight of
points in
hands,
your acrobatics. Yeah, they got just a cool kit. Like it's just really great. All right, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about disarming traps. In my experience with 5e, you don't really get a lot of play in dungeons. Like percentage-wise, in official adventures, you're gonna be underground in a dungeon like 20% of the time or less. And so rogues can disarm traps, and we already have seen traps kind of fall by the wayside in terms of game design. They're not always good. They're often not good. But I would posit that if you are playing in my fabled urban setting that I think rogues exist in, and you're dealing with other factions that are like very powerful government types or other guilds, they seem like the kind of people who would put traps in their building. Another thieves guild would trap the crap out of their stuff, right? And that is a great opportunity for a rogue to be in the party to heist. The other idea I have is that not all traps are physical. I think there is such a thing as social traps and situations that maybe a rogue is better at getting out of. Like a dinner party, let's say, or even an ambush or something that's like a soft ambush, a checkpoint that's made to catch your party, and he gets you out of that jam.
It's really weird you talking about social stuff again. I always consider the rogues as being high charisma, but that's really not necessary for the class at all.
No,
which is so weird. Yeah, like I'm trying.
No.
Like I always just assume the rogue is a kind of a charismatic charlatan, But like in general, if you're making the best, like most efficient in combat class, like you're not going to have high charisma at all. It's really interesting.
No, oftentimes the rogue goes high dexterity and high intelligence.
Yeah.
Just because the investigation for discerning traps and stuff like that is really handy, especially if you don't have a wizard.
Yeah.
Because wizards are the only other class that really use intelligence. So if you don't have a high intellect character, you're going to be suffering on all of those skills that really use intelligence. And if you don't have any other party members that use it.
That's interesting.
I don't know why we keep coming back to this like perfect vision of a rogue. Like, what in fiction am I referring to in my brain that is making me picture this kind of character? Maybe it is a Nathan Drake type or Indiana Jones or something about this guy who jumps and climbs on things. Assassin's Creed, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah, it's this archetype that is so it's so ingrained, but it's like very hard to put your finger on it. Like, because I'm imagining this guy just black leather, who's sitting at a bar with a hood on, who just is, waiting for the right coin to do the right job. And oh man, yeah, I don't know where that comes from. There's no like, you can't point to a specific character like Gandalf for a wizard. Like, there's no kind of like Gandalf figure for a rogue, is there? I'm trying to think.
No, so I don't know what I'm referring to. Like, in my brain, my imagination is just drawing on awesome things that I don't remember observing or watching.
Yeah, that's same.
I feel like
same
the
here.
rogue is really just this, just kind of lone wolf type that kind of works with people reluctantly. Like they tend to do things on their own, and even within a party, they tend to act of their own accord and do their own thing. They're a very independent class that they work really well with other classes, but
They work really well alone.
They also tend to do their own thing. So everyone's sneaking, or let's say the rogue tries to sneak through and the rest of your party doesn't, and they get caught. Then the rogue's there and he can save the day because he decided to sneak and he wanted to do his own thing.
It's interesting. It's like, I don't know if the rogues are the best at everything by themselves, but like in general, I think they are hands down the best at surviving and getting out of a situation. Even if that's just straight up running away and hiding, like they're very good at being smart about combat and when to jump in and when to hide and when to sneak and when to jump out.
Yeah. The final thing I think rogues are good for is what I call unethical problem solving. And that is because of their upbringing, their life, their connections. They are going to be in the position to make moves that other classes just wouldn't. And I think all the classes have this capability within their own little circle of influence. Like a cleric is going to have these sort of religious connections or like God connections. But the rogue is definitely willing to do things that the other party members are not.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting because they might be indebted to a certain character or a certain group. And instead of paying off that debt, they might just kill them.
Yeah.
They might just be like, well, I see another way out of this problem. Instead of having to work off
or
my
just get the hell
debt,
out of Dodge.
Stab them.
So dive and dodge. What were you gonna say, Jake?
So I'm thinking, when you think of the traditional intra-party like conflict, it's usually between a lawful good paladin and like a chaotic neutral rogue. Do you think that's oftentimes the case? Have you guys had rogues in your party that have caused trouble or have kind of gone against the team because they're how they are as a class?
Yes.
Really?
Too often.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've just had rogues who just kind of abuse the sleight of hand nature of their class and they just steal things from other player just to like be disruptive. And that's more of an issue with the players that you have, but it is something that rogues can tend to do. Like, I steal all this character's gold that he just found in the dungeon. It's like, well, here we go again.
If I recall, the only trouble that was caused was our rogue player was pretty new to the system, and he wanted to do all kinds of cool flips and tricks and like shoot 3 arrows out of his bow and surf on a shield down some stairs. And I'm like, well, you only got 1 action and you're level 2, so which I just hate. Like, that's something about 5e that I'm not too wild about, is the limitations on imaginative players who don't know better. I kind of wish the D&D worked the way they wanted it to work, because then it'd be just like really flashy and fun. Not to say that it's not.
Start him at level 8.
So yeah, he was just for a new person who's never played D&D, that's just a lot of overwhelming info. But yeah, so as far as problems go, he was pretty independent inside the game, and then just constantly disappointed outside of the game because I wouldn't let him do the cool stuff he wanted.
Oh man.
So yeah.
Oof.
Let's talk about the core features of the class a little bit, because I think there's some cool stuff you can build into your world and into your game. So the first thing everyone knows about this is called Thieves' Cant.
Is it
Cant?
Is it Cant or Cant?
It's a secret code. I think it's better to say Cant, yeah, because when you say Thieves' Cant, I want to say, yes, we can. But yeah, so
I gotta go, guys.
We just like, that was the sound of all of our subscribers just leaving. But yeah, so they speak a secret language, kind of a street slang, maybe hand motions, whatever it is in your world. The one that I heard that I like is, people would say the road runs through Waterdeep, and that means that the Thieves Guild is very present in Waterdeep. Right? Like, so they have these cool sayings that don't mean quite what you think they mean.
Oh, okay. Maybe I might have been doing Thieves' Cant wrong. Is it a spoken language?
I think it can be. Let me pull up my thing.
So it's like a mix of like hand gestures, like coded language, and hidden signs. Mm-hmm. So if you think about in Fallout, when you're following the railroad quest,
oh yeah,
they have all sorts of signs in the world, like actual like markings, and that's kind of how it works. Is it's a mix of just a bunch of like little things that help you convey messages without other people knowing.
Yeah. Interesting.
Even a regular conversation.
Because I always viewed it as kind of like just sign language. And it almost gave different players that knew Thieves' Cant that they could do it in like a social situation, and they just have to roll like deception or sleight of hand or whatever, so they can kind of do it secretly. And it allows basically people to metagame if they can Thieves' Cant to each other during like a social situation. Which, yeah, I never even thought of it being spoken. That's interesting.
It says in the player's handbook, it's a secret mix of dialect, jargon, and code. And in addition, you understand a secret set of signs and symbols used to convey messages. So I think that definitely could be sign language. Or
I think
really anything
it's
you want it to
specifically vague on purpose. I like that though.
So mechanically speaking, they are good at dodging just for being thieves. It's pretty cool.
Yeah,
they get a bonus to that. At higher levels, they get, I didn't know this till this last week, blind sense. They can sense invisible creatures as long as they can hear. And I thought that was just super cool.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Very useful.
Yes. At higher levels, they also get something called reliable that turns every time you roll below a 9, it just is automatically a 10. So you can no longer roll anything lower than 10, essentially.
Oh, that's so nice.
I think that's, it just makes it so you're just better.
You're a skill monkey.
And that's skill monkey. And the final thing they get is just their core class it's called Stroke of Luck. They can turn a miss that they roll into a hit, or turn a crit fail into a crit success once a day.
What level is that at?
I think is great. That's a 17.
Okay, because that's incredible. That's so roguey though. That's so
actually
roguish.
That's a 20, excuse me.
That's a 20. Okay. So you'll never experience that.
I have never seen a level 20 character.
Dang, that's really good though. It's probably the most quintessential roguish thing. So it makes sense that it's their kind of capstone ability.
Rogues have a lot of specializations. I think they have 7 of them, which is surprising. And this is across all of the content that's been released. So some of this is from Xanathar's Guide. But in the core book, you get the Thief, the Assassin, and the Arcane Trickster. So we're going to briefly talk about each one.
Man, if you really want to have a good dungeoning subclass, I mean, the Thief is where it's at.
Yeah.
They have so many tools and just small things that they get to their kit that just makes going through a dungeon just that much easier. And if you're encountering a lot of dungeons, or you have a dungeon campaign, making a thief will make your day.
Yeah, it'll make your
They have an
life a lot
ability.
easier.
Oh yeah.
There's one ability they get that I really love called Use Magic Device, which I think is a throwback to old D&D. You get it at level 13. It just lets you understand enough about magic that you can use items even when they weren't meant for you. It says you can ignore all class, race, and level requirements to use magic items. So like he could pick up Asarak's staff, and he just like looks at it for a second, and he knows how to use it at level 13. Like that's fantastic.
It's amazing because oftentimes you have to worry about like, well, I can't really use this spell scroll because I don't know Arcana, so and it's going to be a really difficult check. But this is like, no, you just like, it's like, oh, fireball, of course I can cast this.
Yeah. I think when I think of a rogue, I think of the thief specialization. It's just like it's the quintessential classic rogue is the thief.
Oh, you see, like I agree, but then like there's so many more cool things in this class. Okay, so next we have the assassin. It is exactly what it sounds like.
So I love this specific specialization because it's really good at dealing more damage.
Oh yeah.
You get a lot more damage in this class, and it's all about just infiltrating and just killing a specific target. That's all it, and it's really, really good at that specific thing. In other areas it does tend to lack, so it's not going to be as good as a thief in a dungeon, but it's really good at dealing damage.
Yeah.
I also think that there's some really great roleplay opportunities from this. So the game design, the perks that come with this class really speak to, I think, the intention underlying the urban feel of this guy. So this is the assassin. At level 9, you get infiltration expertise. It lets you create a perfect disguise for yourself. You spend 7 days and 25 gold, and you establish fake credentials of your history and your profession or whatever that belongs to someone else. You also get like the right clothing, letters of introduction, official looking certifications, whatever, so that you can just like go and work in the king's castle. And it says this is the best, maybe the most firm rule I've read in D&D. If you adopt the new identity as a disguise, other creatures believe you to be that person until given an obvious reason not to. Which really means that unless the GM pulls some crap and is like, wait a minute, you're not really you're a bear, you're a giant talking bear.
Mr. Barrington.
Sorry, Mr. Barrington. Like you're never going to be found out. You're a doppelganger that is not a magical creature.
Yeah, I think
It's amazing.
in addition to the assassin doing just insane amounts of damage, the one rogue that I had in my games was an assassin, and he had a cool magic item that was called the Scorpion's Embrace, and it was a bracer, but whenever he grabbed something and he so chose, basically a scorpion tail would emerge from his bracer and stab whatever he was grabbing. And so he would use that magic item coupled with all of the assassinate abilities, and he could just walk up to someone in like a crowded bar and just go, and they would just die. Like it was just incredible. It worked so well. But I think
That's awesome.
like they can do loads of damage, especially like when they're hidden and when they're being sneaky. But I think one of the things that assassins can do that most people don't even think about is using poisons. I think a lot of times when people find poisons in D&D, they're like, okay, we can put this on maybe the archer's arrows, and maybe I can put it on my blade or something. But not even that of like slashing someone with a poison dagger or shooting someone with a poison arrow. I love the idea of just pouring poison into a cup and like somehow switching that out for whatever the enemy in front of you or this person in front of you is drinking. And like having the poison do its damage that way. Like that is so underutilized from an assassin. Like I feel like
I've never seen that
yeah,
in D&D.
Yeah, and it seems so assassin-y, right?
Maybe with your infiltration expertise, you can look like an official like governor or something.
Even a cupbearer.
Yeah.
Whatever. Like
Have
you
a drink with me,
infiltrate a
friend.
freaking like low level intern type the person in the court, and you become a cupbearer.
Yeah.
Just to poison one person one time and then just get out of town.
It's so
This
great.
this subclass just has political intrigue written all over it.
Yeah.
So if you're playing in a campaign that has a lot of just social aspects to it, this class is going to be great for it, especially if there's a lot of politics involved.
Which is so funny because on like if you just read their early entries and you're reading, oh, they get like bonus damage and whatever, yada yada. It's like, no, this is a chameleon class that can do almost anything socially.
Yeah, and there's more of those later.
As you can tell, we're pretty wild about them.
Oh yeah,
Jake, take it.
So this is the one I am itching to play the most, despite the fact that I've pretty much only played rogues when playing myself. But I love the concept of a rogue that has a little bit of magic that can help out in so many different ways. Like, it just has so much utility layered on top of the cool things that a rogue already can do. Like, think about Mage Hand or like a Familiar. Like, all of those things help a rogue so much. Like, I love the Arcane Trickster.
So, and I think that I know what David's going to talk about for class features. The Mage Hand spell is just core to the Arcane Trickster. At level 3, when you get your class specialization, you also improve your Mage Hand, which means it can now pick pockets, and it can use thieves' tools to pick locks and disarm traps at range. So all your class skills, like the core things you think of a thief doing, you can now do at range.
That's insane.
Yeah, it's insane. You can pick a pocket from
across
30 from across the room. That's so insane.
That's really great.
Like, not having to be right next to the door you're picking or the trap that you're disarming is insane.
In some ways, this is pretty useful for dungeons because you can disarm traps just by slapping your hand into it like a mouse trap, right? Like, you're just disarming it by wrecking it.
Yeah, it gives the class a lot of just general utility. So once you hit 7th level, you get access to 2nd level spells, which means you can cast invisibility on yourself. Which is super busted as a rogue, because now your sneak attack is almost always going to hit no matter what, unless they have blind sense.
Yeah,
so true sight. Yeah,
it's super. It just adds so much utility to yourself and what you can do. A lot of spells that you can cast at low levels are generally good for utility anyways. So just having them in your back pocket, just being able to whip it out is just it's great.
So there's one last thing about this spec, and that is at level 17 you get Spell Thief. And it just means that so if somebody casts a spell at you, you can do a roll, and there's a chance you can just steal it from them, and you can cast it for the next 8 hours, and they can't.
That is just asinine. I love that.
I love it. Like, imagine, I guess I keep coming back to Asarak just because he's on my mind for like powerful liches.
Yeah.
But he casts Wish on you, and you just somehow, I don't know how, you just airbend the spell away from him and put it in your pocket.
Or even just like power word kill.
Or at least later that day.
Yeah, like any major high level spell, like Meteor Shower, you're just like, oh, I'll take that for 8 hours, friend. It's just like, wow. That's incredible.
In some ways, the class is a little more lighthearted, I think, because you're doing sillier things with your mage hand and with just tricks in general. You are a trickster, and I think that theme is really well represented here. Even stealing a spell, like, mechanically is very powerful, but it's also very silly. Because I don't know how a regular, not like barely magic using person can snatch a spell away from a powerful magic user.
Yeah, I kind of like that. That's the theme of my game. I feel like it's a little more like, it's really dark in some areas, but like, I don't know. I feel like an Arcane Trickster would fit right in with kind of the wildness of magic. Like, I love that.
Yeah.
What's next?
All right, and now we're getting into the Xanathar's classes from Xanathar's Guide to Everything. The first is the Inquisitive. And as far as I can tell, this is just, when you think of a Inquisitor, just any very powerful, perceptive person who's very intimidating, this is that for a rogue. So, case in point, at level 3, you get an ability called Ear for Deceit, and it makes it almost impossible for people to lie to you convincingly. You can see right through them.
I just love this class being a detective. Like, they're just trying to root out almost an anti-criminal association rogue, where they're just trying to get out like everyone who's in that thieves guild. Like, they're just trying to rout everyone who is a part of, the Assassin's Guild or anybody who's like being a criminal.
That's really cool. So actually, I think that they would probably be high up in a criminal organization just to spot other treachery from the lower down minions in the different cells.
Yes.
And or he sits at the right hand of a king and he's like, no, that guy's lying, don't trust him. Like there's just it's a totally different direction for a rogue, and it's very exciting, I think.
Yeah, like I feel like social situations change if you have an inquisitive rogue in the party. Like a lot. Like there's so much they can discern and so much they can do, but they almost have to be in a position of power to kind of utilize a lot of their skills. It's just so intriguing. Like I just want to see this in action.
Yeah, I've never seen it played. Imagine taking 3 levels of rogue to get inquisitive, and then the rest of your levels are in paladin. So you're just this powerful, incredibly perceptive person with a background in crime and stuff like that.
Oh, what an interesting combo. I love that.
Yummy.
All right, next up is the mastermind. I call this the social thief. And the master of intrigue. Very cool.
Yeah, I really like this one. And this one and the last one, so the mastermind and the inquisitive, I think are going to fit so well into Wizards of the Coast new 5th edition stuff that they're putting out, their new adventure module for Dragon Heist in Waterdeep. I feel like that's going to be a much more social, much more urban game, and I think rogues in general would fit better into it, but the inquisitive rogue and the mastermind rogue, they're like almost tailor-made for that campaign.
Yeah,
this is the what I would call the Ocean's 11 like major class, where they're the ones who are planning the heist. They're the ones who are running the show.
Yeah,
that's good.
Like I think if this person was in the party, like they would basically be the face or like the leader of the party, you know, like they would have so much control over everything. I love the concept.
So I feel like their moves are not quite as powerful for their bonus class or their specialist class. But I know at 3rd level you get what's called Master of Tactics. It makes it so the help action is now a bonus action, and you can use it up to 30 feet away.
Oh, that's
incredible. This represents you just like commanding people. I know, it's great. You command people on the battlefield to attack this or do this, and they have a bonus to that. And I think it's thematic and it's pretty useful.
Yeah.
I'm just imagining almost like Batman, where he's not necessarily the most powerful character in and of himself, but he's great at just being a tactical mastermind and guiding people on how to win a fight.
Oh yeah.
And at the last thing they get at level 17 is called the Soul of Deceit, and it just means you can't have your mind read unless you want it to be. And when it does happen, you can present false thoughts with a saving throw.
Whoa.
And also, magic cannot determine if you're lying. So you're just this iron fortress of a mind that is just immune to the world. And I think in a world like D&D where you have magic, this would be really powerful. Because imagine you could have a major plot point built around like information you've gotten from the mind of some powerful person, and you find out halfway through it's all been fake. Like he is trained for this.
Yeah, like I feel like this fits really well for a bad guy or even just an NPC to be able to, I don't know, have so much social control over the organization around him, or just even around like the city. Just like having so much manipulation and control. Like, I can already imagine an NPC in Waterdeep that's just gonna be really messing up the party's plans.
You could make this guy be your big bad villain, and he's just a player character class that you've leveled up to like 17 or 20.
Yeah.
And you're just playing him the way that he would naturally react. Like maybe he was an ex-adventurer who's everyone he knew just sort of died or fell away, and he's become the head of the Thieves Guild, and he's just untouchable.
Yeah.
And brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Got to calm down on this one, guys. Next is the Scout. This is, I keep saying that the Rogue is more of an urban class, but it looks like the Scout is making an effort to return back to that wilderness explorer, which is really, really fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So this is basically just what the Ranger class should be.
Yeah, it's a more interesting Ranger.
Yeah.
Without a pet.
Yeah. but you can always get a pet.
This one's really interesting.
We'll probably...
Yeah, reading through it, I wasn't too excited until I was reading other people's comments on D&D Beyond about how they would build a scout, and apparently the mobility you get because they get a lot of movement bursts, combined with a monk, is very powerful, which is just cool to think of that they're moving like 60 feet without even running in a round.
Yeah, the scout is a really interesting like navigation class. Like they're really good at just going ahead of the party and just seeing what's up.
They're finding traps. Remember that are not necessarily tiger traps. These are dangers ahead.
Yeah, I love the scout, but only really if it's multi-class with something like a monk or just like a standard fighter. Like I feel like the scout would be really good, and then it would have to be a specific campaign where you're kind of in the wilderness. And a lot of times, like when you're making a character and the DM will know the campaign and know the setting. And so he can kind of work with the ranger and be like, yeah, you might not want to pick this favored terrain because we won't be there all campaign. So using that same thing, like I think if you talk to your DM and realize it's a more wilderness focused campaign, the scout is a really cool option.
Mm-hmm. And then the last one we have is the swashbuckler. This is your duelist focused pirate kind of rogue. Very unique feel.
Yeah.
This is the Johnny Depp character.
It's
in 5e.
It's weird because I almost think of it not even like it's called the swashbuckler, but none of its abilities have to be pirate themed. Like it's just kind of a charismatic dueler. And a lot of it gets maneuvers and a lot of like bonus to dueling, and you can add your charisma to your initiative roll, which is pretty cool. Yeah, I find this one fascinating too. I would love to see this in action because it looks like just so much fun.
Yeah, it seems mechanically underpowered, like reading through it. So I would have to see it out in the wild to really give it a good judge. But like compared to how excited I am for the assassin and basically everything else. Like you get the ability to fancy footwork lets you move without triggering an attack of opportunity against a creature you've attacked that turn. I'm like, all right, but you're right. Like it has all these plugs into charisma and just kind of moving quickly and dueling. I'm weirdly not that excited for this.
Yeah. Okay. So
it seems pretty strong.
I like the idea of it soloing someone, and like it almost can work as a tank, not even a tank, more like a crowd control distraction, like aggro absorber. Like it can basically call out an enemy and that enemy will look at him and like it will compel that enemy to duel him. And this swashbuckler can do all sorts of stuff and survive that, but the whole time maybe he's just trying to keep that enemy away from his comrades until they can help him out.
That's true. That's pretty cool.
It almost reminds me of like a Way of the Drunken Fist monk, where it's, you're just kind of a distraction, and you're just like kind of bumbling around and just waiting for your team to finish them off.
That's a good comparison. Yeah.
It's also important to note that as far as I read in here, at level 3, you can use sneak attack without needing advantage. Which no other rogue archetype got that. I thought that was really unique.
I want to see this. And I think the rogue as a class, the more I'm looking at it, like each of these I want to see. Like oftentimes if we're looking at a class and all of their subclasses, like there's some, it's like, okay, cool, yeah, whatever. But like all of these, you know,
even the ones I'm least enthusiastic about are still amazing.
It's just intriguing. I want to see them. I would love to see them. Like if anyone picked, you know, a swashbuckler, I would be happy.
7 thieves on the town.
7 rogues, man. I love that.
That'd be cool. The seven sea thieves.
Yeah, that'd be your gang. But we've talked a lot about what we like about the rogue, but what are some downsides to being this class?
So the rogue,
like downsides to playing the class, or
I think downsides to playing also versus downsides of being the dungeon master. Like I'm thinking in terms from the dungeon master. Like if a rogue is in your party, it does change the game substantially because the rogue is inherently, I don't know if this is always the case, but generally opposed to power structures and is kind of working in the shadows and doesn't want to reveal what his intentions are. And so the rogue essentially like might try to do things that other classes won't. And you as a dungeon master have to be like open to that and have to really realize where the rogue can potentially be like, well, why don't we just kill the guard captain? You know, whereas a lot of other classes, you can kind of keep them in their own play nice.
Yeah, the rogue has a tendency to go off script.
Yeah.
I think that the rogue, if you're playing a rogue, probably the worst thing about the class is that you don't have a lot of AoE. So you're not going to be able to attack a lot of enemies.
It's single target.
One attack still. And all of your damage is focused in your one attack. And if it hits, it's big. If it doesn't hit, then, well...
Yeah, trouble.
Yeah.
So going back to a little more of the RP angle of the rogue downsides, I think that a good DM would work with a player and come up with some just truly scary organizations. So it's easy to imagine a Thieves Guild working kind of like Skyrim, where it's ultimately like a PG-13 rated thing. But if you could make your Thieves Guild more like the drug cartels from Breaking Bad. Like these are dark people, scary situations, and they just kill
power hungry
whoever gets in their way. And I think that'd be such a good hook into the world of just maybe this thief owes a lot of people a lot of money. He could be on the run, and he's compromising the party's safety just by joining them. And maybe that's why he joined them.
I think that's one thing to consider if there's a rogue in your party, and maybe even you're another player. That rogue will most of the time have baggage or secrets or obligations to shady organizations that you don't know about. And so it is imperative to almost try to figure out, like, all right, man, who's after you? Or, what who have you wronged in the past? To try to figure out, like, there's going to be some plot points in the future where these big, bad, scary organizations will want something. There's a debt to be paid or an obligation owed. And those kind of organizational things could be a con for the rest of the party because they're kind of dragged into this mess that they didn't make, but very much a pro for the dungeon master, who now has all of these hooks that he can use to reel back in all the time.
I would love to see the first mission be essentially a con that the thief has pulled on the rest of the party. Like, he needs their help doing something that seems innocent and totally justifiable, but he's really just putting them into a compromising position where now they are also being chased by the cartel.
They're suddenly in the same
right. And it's such a great way to just draw them in. So instead of the rogue player having to make up a reason to go along with an otherwise pretty decent party, now you have a reason for an otherwise decent party to be dragged into the rogue's crap.
Like he's hired these guys to steal from this cartel, but he doesn't say that it's a cartel that they're stealing from. He just says it's like an easy heist. And then they find out it's a cartel afterwards, and now they're just running.
Yeah.
See, now that I'm thinking of the rogue, I'm thinking conceptually, I'm thinking where my influence truly comes from is the two guys from The Road to El Dorado.
This could be our destiny, our fate. Miguel, if I believed in fate, I wouldn't be playing with loaded dice.
Like, those two characters are the most roguish people I can think of. Like, they're just, forgetting their own lies and getting caught up in things and organizations that they don't know anything about. And they're just being, kind of... I don't know. They're just trying to rogue their way through, huge historical events. And just kind of getting caught up in them. And they fit so much as rogues.
I couldn't agree more. So I think we've already talked a little bit about the kinds of adventures a rogue can get into. In fact, I probably should just sit down and write a book, a series of short stories about a guy getting into trouble. But let's talk about the urban jungle.
What a fitting place for a skill monkey. An urban jungle.
Yeah, that's where they live.
That's where they live, eating skill bananas all day. All right, so I have a few thoughts here, and one of them is that civilization is a great place for bad people to hide.
Yeah.
And I think that just bad people are a great motivating factor. You can build encounters around this. I think if you're going to build an urban campaign, then you're going to necessarily not be fighting monsters as much as humans who are monsters. And that's a very different tone, because this is no longer like killing a goblin who doesn't have a soul and doesn't matter. Like, these are real people with families and lives, and also a lot of crime. Crime in their life.
Yeah, I think another key thing to remember, if you're playing a rogue, is just to ask the dungeon master when you're in when you enter a new, maybe not necessarily even an urban environment, but just any civilization or any new place, just asking the dungeon master and saying, "Do I know anyone here?" I think that's a great way to hook yourself into the world even more, and for the dungeon master to be like, "Oh, I can introduce this NPC that way," and for you to kind of have like, just seeing someone and being like, "Ah, Al, you look different. It's been too long," just like that. It's like, okay, there's history.
Orlando
there.
Calrissian.
Yeah.
How you doing, you old pirate? So good to see you. I never thought I'd get to see you again.
Well, he seems very friendly.
Yes. Very friendly.
Yeah, and just like having that shared history in the world, you can really, I don't know, it fits so well, and it can seed a bunch of future plot hooks or time or different quests or whatever.
And then you can also, if you want to make it hard on your players, you could make every town you go into not only have a familiar face for your rogue, but it's a familiar face who the rogue owes something to.
Oh yeah,
man.
So you always have just great reasons for plot hooks. He's like, "Hey, look, you owe me it'd be a lot, like 30,000 gold. Go into this crypt that we know is haunted and give me all the treasure you can, because you owe me, and I'm just gonna break your legs if you don't."
And the rest of your party's legs.
And you got a cleric, so it's gonna be super easy. Like, go do that. And you have these built-in hooks. Like, yeah, I'm wondering if the rest of the classes that we cover on this podcast are gonna be so easy to build quests around.
I think some of them have good quests, like Paladin, but the Rogue definitely lends itself to bringing you into the world.
Yeah. So someone needs to explain to me how to get advantage in the rules as written for a rogue to get a sneak attack.
So you don't need advantage to get a sneak attack. You just need to either have someone within 5 feet, like an ally, who's there, so that you can, wander around behind and get the sneak attack, or you need advantage.
Okay.
So you need you need to have the upper hand in some way when fighting, so that when you're dueling this person, you can strike them in a manner that is more debilitating.
So something that I'm really learning about D&D these days is just how little I have read or how little I remember of the rules. Apparently, I read it back in 2014, 2015, and I internalized a lot of it, and then I just made up my own rules for a lot of things, and I didn't bother to look it up. So I'm learning and appreciating a lot more about 5e doing this series.
Yeah. I think another system thing, part of 5e, is they leave the rules of stealth a little bit vague, and I think they might have done that intentionally, because if they had some real complex system of how stealth worked, it might have been cumbersome. But like, there's a lot of kind of leeway of like, okay, it's a rogue in broad daylight who's trying to roll stealth with no cover. It's like, do you just make that check like a 35, or like what do you do? And so it kind of I think it relies on dungeon master interpretation, and leaves a lot up to the dungeon master to determine how stealth works, in order to not make a rogue broken, because a rogue can just run out into the middle of a field and suddenly he rolls somehow like a 29 stealth. It's like, okay, do you let him just disappear? It's...
I would so it's important to remember that stealth is not invisibility.
Yeah.
And a lot of players I've seen treat it like that.
Yep.
And I feel like it's from World of Warcraft, where you just press a button and suddenly you turn
yeah, that's what the rogue literally
anywhere.
does. Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah.
It makes that sound,
Yeah, it does.
But yeah, so you really got to plan around that and just be very clear with your players, explaining like you're not invisible, like you're hiding behind something. You're physically still there and visible.
Yeah.
Maybe you're a contortionist in your background, and that might give you a small boost. But otherwise, like, unless you're cramming yourself into a tiny crate, you can't hide it just anywhere.
So if you've seen the newest Avengers movie, a lot of rogues tend to think that they're Drax when he says, "I'm not moving, so you can't see me."
Yes, that's so true.
And that's just all rogue players in 5e.
Yeah, I would agree.
And that's just not how it works.
Yeah, I think this just requires some more communication on the dungeon master's side. Like, they have to be like, all right, listen up, this is what stealth is. Explaining to new players, like, it doesn't just, you don't snap your fingers and roll a high roll. You know, even if you roll a nat 20 on stealth, like, that doesn't mean you suddenly become invisible. Like, you have to justify how this happens. You know, the same thing can really happen anywhere. You know, like, say the charismatic bard walks up to the king and says, "I want to be made prince," and rolls a nat 20 on persuasion. That doesn't make him the prince, you know? Like, you just have to explain what skill checks are and how some things require a skill check that is just so high that you shouldn't think it's possible sometimes, you know, or maybe not even letting them roll.
Yeah, I think that. So if we're extrapolating what it means to crit, like if you're swinging a sword at someone and a crit is you doing the most damage as possible for you to do, that's still limited by the strength of your arm and your body and your weapon.
Yeah.
And so if assuming you're letting people crit skills, like you go up to the king and you were the most convincing and you say the most convincing thing you could say, it's not going to convince him.
Yeah.
Because you're not magic, you're just like the best you could have possibly done.
Yeah. So I think, the stealth for the rogue, it just implies a little bit of communication. But other than that, I don't think that's a real flaw of the system. I think the vagueness of the rules is sometimes more beneficial than like a hardcore, crunchy system would be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that just in general, the rogue class is so well designed, and you can tell that there's been a lot of work and care put into designing the features and all of the numbers balancing, that it's a very good class.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree.
And that's coming from David, who doesn't even like D&D.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I hate it. No, but it's a great class.
What type of person should play a rogue? Who would enjoy this the most?
I think a rogue requires a player that is creative. I think in order to make the rogue shine, you have to build encounters in such a way that there are different things for the rogue to do, because they might not necessarily survive in like a full-on bloodbath conflict, you know, in melee. So because of that, I think you have to provide a lot of different cool things for the rogue to do. And a lot of those things shouldn't be obvious. And so I think it takes a creative player to play a really good rogue, because they can make use of some of these interesting scenarios or cool encounters where they can, maybe sneak across an area and then do an attack from behind, or planting poison on the person you're supposed to kill later on, or, you know, even just swinging from the chandelier and doing a backflip and sneak attacking from above. Like, all of these things require some degree of pushing a system to its limit and really being bold enough to try to be creative and see what they're allowed to do in combat. So I think it takes a bold person and a creative person to really play a good rogue.
Yeah, you definitely have to be on the more crafty side of things to really take advantage of all that the rogue has to offer. There are a lot of there's a lot of things that the rogue has to offer, like being very sneaky, being very deceptive, utilizing sleight of hand. If any of that appeals to you, like, the rogue is going to be great specifically for you. If you like to just deal a lot of damage, the rogue's great. If you like to be very investigative, the rogue can do that as well. There's a lot that it has to offer in those areas.
Yeah, this is all really good stuff. I'm just thinking that, so maybe there is a ideal player, but I think the ideal player can play any class perfectly. And in the case of the rogue, in the game, the character might not necessarily have a good reason to be with the party, or he might drag them into his complicated life. But I think the player is really focused on these big solutions and this moment-to-moment innovation, climbing walls and casting your weird distracting spells and whatever it may be. And I think in the hands of a really competent player, it would just be the most fun to DM for.
Yeah.
And also to play. At least as far as the classes we've talked about so far. I'm probably going to be just a huge fan of all the classes by the time we finish this series. Because right now, Rogue is definitely my favorite.
So what are some potential like character concepts you can think of for Rogue? Like thinking backstory, maybe even multi-classing. Like what are some cool concepts you can think of involving the Rogue?
So in the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, they have a background called the Cloistered Scholar. It's kind of like a hermit, but a little more of like a library bent.
Oh, yeah.
And so I would do a Cloistered Scholar, Rogue, Assassin, and that's basically so I could play Daredevil from Marvel's Daredevil.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
He could even be blind, because then I'd have blind sense.
Oh, that's cool. Oh, I love that.
So one of the characters that I've been thinking of is you could almost have, kind of like in Game of Thrones, a character who is the mask of many faces, where you have a really good assassin rogue, where you kind of just don't even know who their character is, just because they're always wearing a mask and they're always just deceiving people. And yeah, the character that you're interacting with is kind of a mystery because you don't necessarily know what they want.
That's really cool because one of these subclasses gives you the ability to perfectly mimic other people with their voice and
assassin.
manner. Yeah, and you could be a man or a woman, or maybe even a different like race of creature, like a goblin. I don't know how far this thing can go, but you're right. Maybe you're playing this old elf rogue who's so old they've forgotten who they really are, and they just exist and they kill and they're disconnected from the world.
I love the concept of that, of like putting it in a game of like the characters meeting all these NPCs they love and like some they hate, and then at the end, like towards the end, there's a reveal that like, oh, 3 of those NPCs were the same rogue that was just like putting on different faces.
Oh my gosh.
And it's just like, that would be so cool. I love that. Mm-hmm. I think for me,
that's a great archetype.
I think for me, a cool concept I can think. I think I've mentioned it before. Is a lawful good rogue that would be basically an assassin for a church. So like some lawful good organization, like the very hierarchical, almost government backed church would like put marks on who they deemed like evil, like maybe like cultists or like dangerous people. Like they would put marks on them and be like, okay, this person needs to be killed for the good of the realm. And so you would basically be a church assassin, and you would be a rogue, but you would be a lawful good rogue. And so I feel like that would be so interesting. And also if that was aligned with a chaotic neutral conquest paladin. And so you really just kind of flip the traditional trope of like the lawful good paladin, the chaotic neutral rogue. You just flip those. So you have like the church assassin, lawful good rogue, and then like the pure conquest, almost murder hobo-y paladin. I love switching that.
That's really cool, Jake.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Let's enter this week's question vault. This week's question vault is: do you use miniatures and maps or M&Ms?
They're not called that.
I love M&Ms.
Miniatures and maps. Miniatures.
I'm talking about like tactical battle maps.
Oh, then no to both. I'm more theater of the mind, as many of you might be able to guess.
Wait, you're saying you're not a tactical kind of DM, Jake?
No.
Wow.
Shocking. So my answer is maybe, like kind of the last 2.5 games I've run. I have a big erasable battle map. It's a good size. But I don't have miniatures. I just have a whole lot of dice, and so I use those to represent the figures. But all that I would only use that for like the bigger, major, more detailed combats. Like we had one that was in an arena that could rearrange itself to all kinds of different terrains. Oh, cool. And yes, that is based on the Super Smash Brothers level Pokemon Stadium.
Yes,
that's funny. That's
except
funny.
the circumstances were much more dire than your average Pokemon battle. But yeah, so I sometimes I do. Lately, I have not, just because there's a tendency, I think, to get really attached to a setup that you have designed, especially if you're doing 3D terrain, because you have a very specific encounter or space that you're going to put the characters in, and if something happens where those characters deviate and they're not going to wind up going there, like, you wasted hours of your life, and that's
And potentially money.
even for just a dry erase map that you pre-draw. Yeah, you lost it all.
Oh.
Ooh.
So no, the answer is not really.
Yeah, I don't really use them either. I've just been going away from the gamey nature of D&D recently, so I find that it tends to slow down the game, and it tends to just take a lot of prep time because you have to map out the exact dungeon, and when you don't constrain yourselves to a physical map, you can kind of get away with just having very nice, concise verbal descriptions that don't really need a map drawn with them to make sense.
I find that a lot of times when you have a map, especially like a pre-printed one that's very detailed, let's say it's of a tavern, players will move their mini to some location and they say, okay, what's this here? I want to jump on this table. Whereas if you're doing theater of the mind, you don't have to specifically detail every single thing that's in a tavern. They say, okay, is there like a bunch of bottles behind the bar? Like, yes, there would be. You don't have to draw them, and even worse, if they're not in the drawing, then the players aren't going to think to use them a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And so it becomes more like a board game, and I like the freedom of theater of the mind more.
Theater of the mind.
So, okay, I agree with all that, but let me change the question. If you had unlimited money, would you use miniatures and like designed sets?
No.
Wow. Okay.
Very limitedly.
Yeah,
I would only use it in just like very climactic encounters.
Yeah.
Where I really felt like it would add to the game.
Like,
and most of the time, I don't feel like it adds to the game.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is rare. And I think, even if I did have unlimited money, I mean, if I did that, it would be more for just having all those cool miniatures. But yeah, I think the theater of the mind can work really well, unless you have just an unwieldy party. You know, it's like 8 people playing. I actually saw Matt Mercer in an interview. Because I always thought, he's more of a theater of the mind guy, because I'm listening to the podcast. But then I saw one of the streams for Critical Role, and I was like, oh, they're using a battle map and everything. And I was really surprised, because I was like, he doesn't strike me as that type of dungeon master. But then he said in an interview, he's like, yeah, I never use this. The only reason I do is because there's 8 people in the party, and I can't, like, I literally will lose track of everything. Like, I have to have them set up. So unless I had a large party, I don't think I ever would. That's
true. And because when you think 8 players, like, how many monsters do you need to challenge a party of 8 people?
Yeah.
And it would break down in the theater.
So I think the one instance, if I had unlimited money, that I would use it is for boss battles. Because have you guys seen the videos on like YouTube and Reddit of like you see all these people around the table and they're trying to stop the cultists from summoning Tiamat? And then you see the dungeon master pull out this massive, you can't even call it miniature, of Tiamat, and then just slam on the table. And all the players are like, no! Just this huge like, moments like that, just so funny.
Oh, that's terrifying.
That is our vault. Every week we read our favorite 5-star reviews from iTunes. This week's review
comes from 5-star 101 guy, and it's titled Finally. Great to finally find a good D&D podcast. Keep it up. Thanks, 5-star 101 guy.
Wait, do no other good D&D podcasts exist in the whole world?
Classic 5-star 101
does it
guy.
again. All right. Thank you for listening to Vox Arcana episode 16. I'm William.
I'm Jake.
And I'm David.
We'll see you next time. You can follow us on social media. Our Twitter is Vox Arcana Pod. Facebook and Instagram are both at Vox Arcana Podcast. And you can email us at voxarcanapodcast@gmail.com. Remember that theft will no longer be considered a crime in the year 2020.